Hi there. So before we jump into the video, just wanted to give you a quick heads up. We had great speakers for this event, so the content is good. However, there was one challenge, so just wanted to let you know. The event was very popular and ran at capacity, and the platform that was used to run the webinar did not behave that well and experienced some issues that night. So, of course, we had a choice to just not publish the recording at all, but because we had a good comprehensive discussion and the speakers provided some great insights that you may find quite valuable, we went ahead and still published this video so you could get access to those insights as well. So we did edit the video a bit, but there may still be some occasional audio video hiccups, which could not really be edited out, okay? So just try to focus on the content, and I hope you learn a lot, and enjoy. So welcome, everyone, once again. Thanks for joining us tonight. For those of you who just joined, welcome for the third time. So during our interactive speaker panel tonight, we'll cover the fascinating topic of how to search for your first UX job. We have invited some awesome folks that you have just seen, and we'll bring them back in a couple of minutes, who have successfully found UX jobs, who will share the insights from their journeys with you and answer questions as well. So for those of you joining for the first time, my name is Michael, and I'm the founder of BeginX, a UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people who know UX basics transition into the field in one of the most efficient and affordable ways, and without quitting their jobs. So I do not mean this to brag or anything like that, but just wanted to give you guys a bit of a background for credibility purposes. So we have run multiple cohorts so far. We've been around for over 3 years and helped over 90 people or so get hired into UX roles. Okay. So here are some of the companies that they were hired by. So we've seen lots of people go through this entire UX career transition. So just a few quick housekeeping items. As we discuss the topic with the speakers tonight, we'll pause a couple of times during the webinar to take some questions, and we'll also take more questions after the panel as well. So if you have a question, and as we're going through the material, through the content, please make sure you write it down so you remember to ask it. Please use the Q&A section. You can see there is a Q&A tab for asking questions. So this way, others can also upvote those, and so it will be more interactive. So we'll grab questions from there. So our event co-organizer and facilitator, Andy Morris, will help out and review and keep track of those questions and help us help moderate all of those. Okay, also know a lot of people ask often, we'll record the event and may publish it later, but that is still to be decided. So if it turns out well, then we'll publish it. Zinra and Andrea, feel free to, looks like you guys are muted, so please feel free to unmute yourselves to make sure that the audience can actually learn from your awesome answers. Okay. So we'll mostly today, as you remember that framework, right? So today we'll mostly focus on the search, prep, and execution phase, right? And asset creation, and possibly touch upon the practice and grow phase, basically becoming that hireable candidate. And we have quite a few questions prepared for these guys, right? So I'll facilitate the discussion and may interrupt occasionally to ensure we're on time. And most of the audience, like lots of people in the audience, have a chance to ask their questions. Also, every speaker does not have to answer every single question, right? Just pick the ones you feel you might have the most insight on. Don't feel compelled to answer every single thing. For the audience, again, if you have questions, please use the Q&A tab. This way we can, this way others can see it and upvote as well, right? So ideally, please also let us know which speaker the question is for, who the question is for specifically. So why don't you guys take 30 seconds or so each to introduce yourselves.
I'm Andrea. I am a senior UX designer at ADP. I work on design systems and design operations mostly. And I came from, I've had a really interesting past. I went to school to write musicals. so very related. And then my English degree, really with my editorial skills, got me into QA, which got me into realizing that the stuff being passed to me from developers was just not usable. So then I got into UX research and usability testing and things like that. And I really wanted to solve the problems I was finding. And so I took the General Assembly boot camp, I took Michael's boot camp, and I did a few client projects that transitioned me into UX design. And now I work on the design side of things. So that's me.
Thanks, Andrea.
I guess it's my turn then. Hi, everyone. I'm Xiran. I'm currently working as a UX designer at Michaels. And prior to Michaels, I worked at a design agency called Central Ready and a fintech startup named Kiwi Insurance on a few projects. And at Central Ready, I worked on many projects for 3 years. And prior to that, I worked as an architect in different offices. And I hold a master and bachelor degree both in architecture. And I've always been interested in the intersection between digital and physical experience. So to me, the transition to UX, I see it more of an extension rather than a transition, actually. So that's all for me.
Hi, I'm Adam. I'm a UX design researcher at US Bank. I took a boot camp, and I also came from an experience of being an advertising researcher, actually. So I was doing that kind of research for substances. I went to school for weird things like animal behavior and computer sociology. I also was a writer for a number of years too, and just sort of like a weird kind of general technologist in that was. So that was kind of some of my experience that brought me to UX.
My background is also not at all in UX. Studied politics, philosophy, and economics in college with a focus in behavioral economics. So just like learning why people do the things that they do, which is actually a kind of a nice foundation. Once I started working in a bunch of startups and working with designers and realizing that there's a way to bridge studying people and creating environments that would allow them to do their best work or make their best decisions with design and with research. So a similar path to Andrea, worked on a bunch of different projects, did Michael's boot camp, and then was able to fully transition into a UX role. And now I do all the fun, sexy systems backend stuff. So that's where you'll find me.
Thanks, Ariel. All right. Yeah, looks like we can hear you now. Okay. So at first it was rough, but I think now it's good. Okay, so that's good. So let's come back to the question, right? So Andrea already took a stab at that, right? So basically the question was, before you jump into the actual details of how to search, etc., how do you actually know if you're ready for that job search and whether it makes sense to start? So anyone feel free to just jump in.
Yeah, well, I can. So what really helped me decide that I was trying to start was that I got laid off. So that was an easy way to motivate me. I got laid off from COVID stuff earlier this year in the spring, and it was fun. I mean, I was kind of preparing to do it anyway, so just sort of accelerated the process a little bit. But I think had that not even have happened, my feeling of trying to apply to jobs was more of you never slow down what you're learning, or you never stop learning rather new things, but you tend to kind of like slow down learning like the basic stuff. So all the things that when things start kind of repeating as you're learning new things, and you're like, oh, okay, I kind of knew that already. I picked that up from somewhere else. I already kind of knew that part. And as that sort of repetition keeps coming in, made me feel like my rate of learning like this slow intro things had diminished a bit. And I, again, with not having a job, but definitely felt like I felt comfortable applying to jobs. I felt like I had my portfolio, I had my resume, I did interview experience, I practice things and everything. And yeah, I mean, it just seems like it was the right thing to do. So I hate to say it's like in such a qualitative way because it is a pretty subjective feeling, but I felt like for me, as I felt like I could sort of talk the talk, it raised my confidence at least, and I applied to jobs feeling like I knew that I was saying the things that they wanted to hear and through the interview process and everything. So that was my experience.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, adding on to what Adam and Andrea were mentioning, doing that kind of like test to see how you fare with your existing skills. I tended to do that with different hackathons. I would go into a hackathon with whatever level of knowledge that I had, get into a team and see how comfortable I felt contributing from UX perspective. If I was working with UX designers, other developers, really being able to get my hands dirty and seeing, where I, felt most confident, where I felt the least confident, helped me kind of calibrate and understand areas I should work on as I figured out, how ready I was. Similar to Adam, what really kind of pushed me out of the nest, unfortunately, was a layoff. Otherwise, I would have kept, trying to do UX work in my current job, doing side projects, but not really jumping ship into a real proper full-time role. So I had to get my act together very quickly. And I know we'll talk for this later, but that'd be one of the things that I would have done differently is be more prepared, even if I didn't feel ready to search, but had all my ducks in a row. So when I was ready to search, it was, all seems ahead versus having to get everything ready while frantically looking at the same time.
Thanks, Ariel.
To me, I have a longer journey than probably most people have. I have many friends who very successfully made the transition 5 years ago, and I'm still sort of staying in the architecture field. And there's one moment that I almost done with all my architecture exams as a registered architect, but there was one moment that I had a phone call with a friend of mine who just, very successful UX career. And we had a conversation. She's at Google right now. And after that phone call, I just made, I'm more determined to make the transition. And that, I feel like that mindset, mentally prepared, is the first step that I made all the transition, put all the work in. And then I started to go to different events, UX events, just to get a sense of what other people are talking. Similarly, read articles about other people's journey. So they gave me lots of confidence and also information of what I'm going to expect.
Thank you, Zinran. So that's good. So kind of touching on this, on a similar question, but a bit from the other side, right? So obviously, to make your job search effective, right, you need to first prepare and actually package all your work, and so you're that attractive candidate, right? What do you think is necessary to become an attractive candidate, first of all, right? What is, in your opinion, the most important part?
I think the first piece is just identifying the types of roles and companies that you're interested in, because the field is so broad, and depending on the industry or type of company that you're targeting, they might have different types of skills or experience that is the most necessary, the most needed. And that might be the best fit for you. So I think once you identify that and get clarity around that, you can be more focused in your search and identifying different job descriptions, figuring out where your skills or experience align, where there's gaps, and then from there, putting your framing around that. I think, at least for me, the more niche I was, the easier it was for me. Like having a background in healthcare and then insurance, like working at a B2C company with a slick UI probably wasn't going to be the right fit for me, both from like a background perspective and also interests. So looking at those areas and focusing in versus going more broad-based was effective for me.
Thanks, Ariel.
I think when you talk about like what makes you a good like someone that someone wants to hire, I think the key things for me isn't that I know everything, but that I am learning. Like people who are actively learning and interested in continuing to grow within the field is such a key skill to have. I can see where you're at right now from your portfolio, but I can't see where you might go without knowing how you're learning. So for me, and how I became a good candidate is I was a learner. I was constantly open to learning new things, constantly looking for the next thing to challenge me. And I think that's what made me an attractive candidate to other people. And that's what attracted me to other people in general, is them being also in kind of this growth mindset and being open to expanding themselves and myself and things like that. So for me, I think that's a key piece of being a hireable candidate.
Adam, what do you think, or Zinra? I know Adam went next last, and by the way, if you could maybe lean in a little bit, I think it's a little bit. Sounds like your audio is kind of like far away.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, that's fine. So I think when I was interviewing, the places I got offers from, I remember in my interviews, I was at that point pretty. Gosh, I think I was just really like familiar with what I was talking about, and I mean, unfortunately, that comes from experience, which I had a little bit of, and I was really lucky that I was able to find the kind of experience that allowed me to talk with that kind of confidence. But the way that I was talking about my research approaches and methods and everything, so I, through just like learning things and reading and talking to people and all these kinds of other ways that I did, I was able to kind of come up with my own sort of like personal beliefs about research. So things like how I saw research as a way of answering questions. And I wanted to be really clear about that and say, I don't just take like UX research as a, like, what do users think about this? Like, no, we want to actually like get pretty detailed about, how are we going to figure out what they use this kind of interaction in this flow. And ultimately, what my methods are for, testing those sorts of things and learning about users and getting those sorts of like actionable results that we can send back. I think that was really helpful. And I felt like the more that I could sort of sound like a researcher, then I was able to talk to them as one. And it wasn't so much like me coming at them as a junior researcher as it was just somebody who was already kind of like in the field. And I mean, it's a really, trite kind of cliche, but there's a lot of faking it till you make it. And I mean, as far as the research side of it goes, I can't speak for the designer sides because it's the whole of the game. But from the research side, I had a really hard time finding people who were open for junior researchers, and they really wanted to hear that you've taken on projects yourself and you can, go through the whole process and everything. And I kind of did before, but again, I mean, I just really sought opportunities out wherever I could, and was able to talk about them in those interviews, and being able to draw from a few different kinds of experiences too. Say, oh, well, that reminded me of that's how I did this, and that's how I did that, and how you like dealt with different issues and talked about constraints and things. So that was what worked for me.
Thanks, Adam. Zinran, sorry for interrupting you last time. I know you already almost started talking, and
I can't wait.
I'd love to hear from you.
Can't wait as a designer. So it could be a little bit different because I know likable, fast learner, talk the talk, all important things. But for designer, there's got to be a portfolio of some sort. And I think the most important thing to be more hireable is, first of all, you identify yourself, like what is your strength, what is your weakness, and what you like to do and what you're really good at. You can be good at learning. Well, that's a skill as well. And I feel like for designer, if you are really good at something, you are more hireable, especially given the situation of the pandemic, that kind of thing. So that said, I feel like craft is important to get a job. So that I see it as an important factor to be a more hireable designer, is that you are good at design.
Thank you, Zinran. So our next question is actually about, I already briefly looked at some Q&A, the Q&A section here, and a couple of people, and there are lots of upvotes about experience and junior design, etc. So basically, just touching on that, how can you guys build work experience when most employers are already looking for candidates with 2 or 3 years of that experience? Do you have any tips? I mean, of course, you can mention BeginX, right? But in addition to BeginX, and like any way that you guys can suggest.
I can go first. I know lots of employers are looking for 2 to 3 years of experience, and that can be a very challenging thing for many candidates. And I know many people thought it's not fair at all. But from employer side, it's a high saturated market, and also because of pandemic, there's so many people and so many good designers, they're looking for jobs. So I feel like it's understandable in that sense that they're looking for like more experience. This just gives them like more reassurance that they don't have to guess, right? You have like some experience. That said, I feel like if you really, really want to be a designer, because I'm speaking more from a designer perspective, and you really, really want a job, then there's got to be ways that you can come up with a project, no matter how you're going to find it, whether it's with friends, you do it like a personal passion project or a client project or a pro bono project. I mean, there got to be ways, because you wanted to be a UX designer, right? You're probably going to spend many years of your life doing that. So if that's the case, there's different ways to actually find like a client project or a project with a more like a business dimension. I think that will really helps to build your case. And also on top of that, 2 to 3 years, because right now it's like, let's say from now on, it's only like 0 years of experience, right? So there's got to be something in your past experience that you can tie that to the 2 to 3 years of experience. Like maybe you have done like marketing before, strategy before. There's probably some commonalities that you can speak to brand yourself.
Thank you, Zinran.
Yeah, just to add to Jinren's point, I came from advertising research before, and I was really lucky in that there was a sister agency in my building, back in these buildings. But there was in my office that developed our in-house software. And I actually got introduced to UX research just by being interviewed as participants for some software that people were developing. And I thought that was really cool, and I helped do that. And I technically wasn't really supposed to be able to do that, but I kind of did anyway. And did a few projects with them where I effectively kind of volunteered my time to work on more UX stuff with the real agency. But what wound up coming from that were portfolio pieces and working, with another UX team, and getting to put that on my resume and say, yeah, I was, a content strategist for this, and I the lead UX research consultant for this project. And there's sort of a bit of padding that you do that I think is sort of inherent in a lot of resume things. But at the same time, it's from a place of real experience that you did something. And if that hadn't happened, I mean, I was going to other events and I knew people who had startups that I was volunteering my services to do UX research for them too. And telling for the low cost of free, I would do a project for them so I could put it on my resume. I mean, it's hard and it takes time, and I really respect that and acknowledge it too. I mean, it sucks. You pull 40, 45 hours a week just doing your normal job, and doing another 20 hours after that to get experience to do. But it does reinforce that you've done this, and you kind of listed on your resume as contract goals, which is completely understandable. And then you are surprisingly not quite as junior as you feel you are, based on your experience that people look at.
Thank you, Adam.
I agree with Adam. I did the same thing in my current company when I was doing QA work. I just started doing UX research because I felt it was important, and I didn't really have buy-in at the time. I was just like, I'm going to start using my own time to start creating these projects, and eventually, the benefit was seen from leadership, and I got more time to work on it, as my actual job until it became a full-time role that I was doing. And I know not everyone's quite in the same position where they can do that, but everyone's in a position where you can take the principles of UX and apply that to your current job. And so just starting to integrate it into your current role is a great way to just start getting experience. Even if it's not the exact experience or it's just fragments of the experience, you're getting most likely to be the expert at your company in that experience. And so it forces you to be really good really fast. And employers really value people that are go-getters, that don't go with just what they're told to do, but they think out of the box and add value to the company. So it's never a bad thing to start doing it at your current job.
I think Rachel mentioned a question here, right? So that she does not like social media like Instagram and Twitter, and does not use platforms. When you talk about having an online presence, other ways to do this besides social media or having a portfolio? Yeah, I feel like, honestly, LinkedIn is probably the main part of your online presence in this aspect, in this area specifically, right? I don't think Twitter and Instagram are absolutely crucial and necessary. Portfolio, yes, portfolio is a must, right? So you have to have a portfolio, right? Especially if you're just starting out, trying to get a job without an online portfolio would be extremely hard unless you already have tons of connections, right? For people with tons of experience, they can still get away with that sometimes, but often that is impossible, pretty much. So yeah, definitely you need to have a website or your online portfolio. Also, what I just wanted to touch on about regarding experience specifically, right? Again, as many folks mentioned, right? You can volunteer, you can do pro bono work, you can find companies, nonprofits, startups, organizations. It's all possible, right? You just volunteer because it's key to do something, to be doing something, right? At any point, not just waiting there and applying for a year, because you could use that year to actually be doing work, even if it's part-time, right? Because then you can actually have something to show on your resume and your portfolio, right? So that's one of the important pieces. So what were your guys' biggest mistakes and lessons related to UX portfolios and case studies specifically?
I'll start then.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest mistake of mine is I feel like I overestimate the importance of portfolio. Being that I know there's a lot of articles out there talking about portfolio. So many people talk about that. Also, there's many best practice articles out there. However, I feel like, just speaking of my own experience, that I spent a lot of time on the portfolio, but I feel like it didn't. There's a lot of time that I spent didn't really move the needle. That being polishing, detail of a case study, and also try to redesign things that I'm not too happy with, that kind of like perfectionism. I feel like after, I would say, the first phase of my job application process, I realized that there's a lot of things that are also very important. Like, for instance, the anecdotes. Like, what if they ask you some question like, hey, could you walk me through an experience that you work with the developers, that kind of thing? Or could you give me a scenario that you disagree with your teammates? Those kind of things. From the architecture background, those kind of questions are not very, I would say, not very expected, because for architecture interviews, usually it's very straightforward. You just present your portfolio and then that's it. As long as you have very good portfolio piece, you get a job. So I think that was my biggest mistake, that I should have spent more time on some other stuff, such as personal branding, like who you are, why you're a designer, why you want to do UX, that kind of stuff. I should have spent more time on design exercise or whiteboard challenge, or even the last round of interviews or the first round of interviews is how to talk about your previous experience and why you want this job, that kind of things, and potentially some anecdotes that prepared in advance. Those are the things that I consider as my mistake in the early phase.
Thank you, Zeron. Yeah, that's very good. Ariella, Andrea, did you guys just in case, because I'm not sure if it's big marker that's misbehaving or is it just Wi-Fi or internet here in New York or something. But anyway, we'll deal with it. We'll roll with the punches and might consider just using a different platform potentially, if this, because we never had this type of issue, but we'll just be moving forward anyway. So what were your guys' biggest mistakes and lessons related to portfolios and case studies?
I do portfolio reviews with people, and I think one of the biggest things people struggle with is the balance of their storytelling versus showing their assets, right? So some people just do picture, and you don't really get a sense of like how that all tied together or the thought process that went behind that. And then some people overtell and give such detailed information about everything they did that you're like, well, I just need to get you to the point, understand why you did what you did and what that showcased. So I think the biggest thing with the portfolio is just the balance of it. And you can play around with that. Just test it out. Show it to friends. Show it to people at network events. People are so shy about showing their portfolio because they're putting in so many hours of work into minor details that people don't care about. They just want to see what you can do and how you did it and why you did it. And so it's really just put it out there, and you'll get reactions right away versus you in your head being like, oh, it needs to be like this and it needs to be like that and it needs to be like this. Just, if you have a portfolio, if it exists, stop for 2 seconds, show it to somebody before you keep tweaking it, because I guarantee you that you're spending time on the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's basically similar to a project, right? Because you just want to kind of user test it, to do some research and get some feedback on it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so another question for you guys. Company type specifically, right? Initially, do you feel it might be better to focus on certain types of companies, like either startups or product companies, services companies, agencies, tech departments within bigger corporations? Do you feel like that was something that you did, or do you have any tips on that?
So, can you hear me? This is Adam.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm dialing in while my computer's doing whatever it's doing. Sorry, I was just trying to restart the Chrome stuff. I took a kind of shotgun approach to this, where I definitely applied to a lot of different things for a lot of UX, but I think research especially. It's pretty cool that a lot of the techniques and everything that you do are applicable towards a lot of different industries and fields. So it's great that there's a lot of overlap among different roles. Specifically for me, I mean, I did have experience in a few specific industries that that I kind of played up a little bit, and I think it helped. But I think what unfortunately kind of helped more for me was just that a researcher before, I was able to kind of hone in on that element of it and say, look, I've already been doing this kind of research for a while. I did, like, you know, other kinds of consumer research I was doing. I was in grad school. I had a pretty research heavy undergrad as well. So basically, trying to focus on those parts. And I think that talking to the researchers who were in the room, there are a lot of people, prospective researchers both. I think focusing on that part and why you're into it really shares your passion and your interest in it. And it gets people to understand why you wanted to do that specifically. And I feel like it's a little industry agnostic at that point, especially kind of your first like main job. Obviously you have an in, that's great. But otherwise, I feel like as long as you're able to find something about whatever you're applying to that shows a sincere interest in it, it comes through.
Thank you, Adam. And by the way, good to appreciate you answering the question even without your video being on. So we'll do whatever works. And yeah, if videos do not work, we'll at least keep you guys on audio so the audience can learn from you guys. Ariel,
hey, Mike, I just dialed in as well.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I can just hear you. And you can, if you just have this blank screen, you can just feel free to just turn it off if you want, if you can. If not, that's fine, because we just see a black square.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll see. Well, yeah, the question was focus company types, right? Basically, initially, do you believe it is better to focus on certain types of companies, like startups or product companies, service companies, tech departments within bigger corporations, etc.? What was your experience there, and did you benefit from focusing in one area, or did you just apply everywhere and search everywhere?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I apologize, these points may have already been made. I've been in and out with the audio, so apologies if it's redundant. I think generally for myself, and I recommend to anyone else, it's important to, again, just identify your goals from like a learning perspective and a career perspective. Depending on the company type and the team structure, you'll have different types of experiences and different levels of support. And we'll work on different types of challenges. So in my experience, I've had an easier time getting my foot in the door with startups. However, the trade-offs of that are potentially not having as much support. If you're the first UX hire, you'll certainly get a lot of access, and you'll have the ability to work on, you know, all areas of the process, which can be really great to learn really quickly. It also requires an ability to educate stakeholders and other folks you work with on the process and the value that UX adds from time to time. Something to think about going into that type of role, that type of company. Agencies can be another great area to work on a lot of different topics, a lot of different areas, and a lot of different projects. If you're someone that works better in a structured environment, maybe like a waterfall approach to delivery, a larger company might be a better fit for you. I found that for me, the easiest conversations have been when I've had some other type of domain expertise or background that align with the company I'm talking to. So having experience with startups, talking to startups with UX, and knowing that workflow and knowing the balance of wearing multiple hats, I found that flowed much easier. And then for other folks that I've mentored, being able to speak to some of the challenges of delivering and working with stakeholders in a broader company was something they could easily speak to, and they were set up for success in talking with those types of companies. I think also the type of background that you have, be something to think through with the opportunity. If you come from an engineering background, transitioning into UX, working in a company that puts you, on a product team when you're on the more on the delivery side, that might be an easier transition for you and easier to talk through, versus if you're coming from, from anthropology, social psych, where you're going to be on the earlier side of the process. Depending on how the team is structured, you'll want to ensure that you have enough overlap, so you can easily have that conversation and position yourself to be a good fit there.
Thank you, Ariella. So, and by the way, before we move on to the kind of next phase, which is talking more about the actual methodologies, I want to take a couple of questions from the audience. What I do love about this platform is that there is this upvote feature, right? So you guys, please keep upvoting questions in Q&A so that we know what is most popular and what, basically, specifically what about people have most questions on. So Rachel is asking, what are your tips? We kind of touch upon this, but please feel free to add if you have anything else, right? What are your tips for making oneself stand out when in a bootcamp? So I assume it's talking about like a competitive advantage, right? You're getting out of a boot camp. How do you stand out so actually hired?
I did General Assembly's boot camp, and I went with 60 people. And a lot of the advice that we got from the career coaches and the sections were very much in a very specific template kind of format, like resume should kind of look like this. Here's how you should do your intro sentence. And I didn't want to be like everyone else because I'm not like everyone else. So I challenged everything that was given to me. And I'm like, how can I change this to make it more me? How can I make it so that I am very much not a student of this boot camp, but somebody that used the boot camp to enhance what already existed about me? And so if you're going through a boot camp, you're probably also following those same sorts of, here's what you need to have on your resume. Here's what your sentences should, like, here's how you answer these questions. Here, like, don't follow that. Figure out how do you take the advice they're giving you and turn it around and say, how does this actually apply to me? And how do I change this to fit with what presents me as me while still taking the good parts of the advice that we're given and going with that. So that would be my biggest thing is, take all the advice from your boot camp and challenge all of it until you've got something that looks completely different from everyone else, while still being true to the meaning behind all the advice you were given.
Thanks, Andrea. So hopefully if the video is in real time as well as sound, Zinran, do you want to answer next? Maybe it is not.
Me?
Yes, Zinran, do you want to answer this next?
Yeah, sure. I think, I'm going to bring up something probably controversial. That is, I feel like the good thing about bootcamp is that it can give you a project or several projects within a very short amount of time. So it's a very efficient way of doing things. The problem of bootcamp is that most of the bootcamp, they have a very similar result. So I've always been very mindful of that, because imagine if every bootcamp produces the same similar result or the deliverables, then it's very hard to market yourself in the job market, given how competitive it is right now. So my approach or my suggestion is that always be very clear about, or always clear about what the result of the bootcamp is, what the project looks like, and what you really want from the project to be a more competitive job applicant. Meaning that twofold, essentially. First thing is, just be clear what you want to get out of the project. It may not cover everything good, but at least having something really strong and form that into a story so that you can speak to in an interview. So that's one thing. The second point is being that you can't just go, for the minimum just to get by. You have to basically spend the actual effort to make the project more compelling to the interviewer or to the recruiters. Meaning that let's say if it is a project without a real client, is there a way that you can sort of leverage some sort of like business metrics or business requirement so that you can speak to that in the interview, that I did consider some of the business requirements, right? If the project is just a prototype without any, dev developers involved, then if there's any way you can to contact a developer or to, even ask questions to the developers that, your friends know, is there a possibility to make it real? Or is there a possibility to know what's the problem or the trade-offs of your design? So even that can bring more depth to your portfolio, to the projects that you gain out of the bootcamp.
Thank you, Zinran. Yeah, those are some great additional insights. So one last thing we touch about, because I know lots of people have questions about experience, junior roles, etc. You guys might have briefly answered this before, and I'm gonna tackle this myself first, and then you guys can provide some input as well if you have anything else. So Calvin is asking, looking for first real-world experience. Where is the best place to start? Where to find freelance? How to find volunteer work, etc. Right? So just a very quick answer, right? So there are multiple ways to do that, right? You can, even for freelance stuff, you can use platform like Upwork, right? You can also just go to incubators, accelerators, just Google them, find startups, and basically just offer your services pro bono. You can use a platform for volunteer work like Catch a Fire. That's one of them. And if you can, if you're tracking the discussion, if you could just maybe put that in the chat, Catch a Fire. So that's like one of the platforms. But essentially, yeah, you just need to be proactive, right? You just need to try to go and meet companies and offer your services, right? And it's not easy, it's hard, right? Because it will make you feel uncomfortable, right? So it's like, what if they reject, even if you're trying to do it pro bono, right? But rejection is the name of the game in marketing and sales, right? If you want, and job search is pretty much marketing and sales, right? So you'll just have to treat these rejections as points on your way to your goal, right? So, and yeah, so do you guys have anything else to add in terms of ways to find real experience or volunteer opportunities or freelance opportunities? Something very, very quick.
I mean, I would definitely just say reach out to people. Don't be afraid to talk to your friends about how you're looking for work. Your friends are doing cool stuff. Don't be afraid to reach out on LinkedIn or reach out on Facebook or anything and say, hey, I'm looking for a project. I want to do work for free. I want to help you out. Don't be afraid to answer some of the calls on some of the Slack channels you're on and say, hey, I can do that. Let them filter you out. Don't feel like you're the one that, oh, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I'm ready. Just answer it. Worst case, they don't respond to you, but don't hurt yourself by not reaching out.
So any more tips, like where specifically to find those opportunities?
So can you hear me?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So what one thing that I wound up doing was I joined a couple of local organizations like the UXPA, both the local chapter and like national, whatever, and found projects that you could work with them. There are a few other ones. There's one called the Foundation, I think, is another. UX Rescue. There are a number of different orgs that you can find projects through, and they're available. And you can also, if there are other kinds of groups that you're not even that you're just affiliated with in some way or another, but you want to support. For example, I was about to, and then I'm not having time to, but I used to foster dogs, for example, and there's a group in New York that I fostered with that I wanted to do some UX research for them for their website. And I was ready to say, hey, I would love to help you guys. I think that I can, talk to some of your users, kind of put together plans and everything and help you kind of put them into focus and really see if there's something you could do to help improve those experiences and get a kind of case study out of it too, and actually develop some experience doing it. So I feel like once you sort of learn the basics of it, what you need more is just sort of like experience and practice to make it happen. And it sounds corny, but I'm looking for these where they aren't just like UX designer wanted. Can help you find ways that you wouldn't have suspected, like a few weeks ago.
Thank you, Adam. So we'll move forward with, we'll just take one more very quick question. And I'll just provide some quick input on this. It's almost like oh wait, somebody upvoted, so that question got lost. Basically, the question was about whether you can try to move into UX within your company. We're just going to tackle this very quickly. It is definitely possible. It doesn't always happen, but you can definitely try. Like we had a couple of alumni actually that did that. Basically, they just networked within their own company. And actually, one person who we actually featured in in an event, a year or so ago, right? So she got away with just having like one case study. Right. Usually it's 3. And I know somebody asked that as well, so maybe we can address that question too. Usually it's 3 case studies. She had only 1, but it was with a real client through our program, right? So that's how she basically positioned herself, and she got a product design role in that company as well. So with that said, I want to keep moving into the actual search methodologies, right? To make sure we cover lots of these different grounds and areas of this topic, right? So there are many search methodologies, as you guys know, right? Which ones are your favorite and why, right? So for example, right, just to mention a few of these, we like to refer to them as channels, right? Like in marketing. Applying on company sites, job boards, recruiters reaching out to you or you're reaching out to recruiters, networking and informational interviews, friends, social networks, etc., referrals. What are your guys' favorites and what has worked best for you specifically?
I can jump in on this one. So I think like the best possible scenario is being able to talk with your friends, people you have an existing relationship with, people that you've already worked with, so you can get the inside scoop on a given role. That might always be possible. So I think also for me, I like postings in like Slack channels or other networks where there's an opportunity to chat with the person who's posted the role, get additional context and answer additional questions before potentially reaching out. And it's a good way to kind of do a temperature check on the role before proceeding with the process or putting your resume into a black hole of a company website. I think what has been actually the most effective for me though is ultimately been working with recruiters, positioning myself to be findable by recruiters, reaching out to recruiters directly. There's a certain, if you're very specific about what you want, what you're looking for, and you can speak to that with a great deal of clarity, recruiters can be your best friend. So for me, that's been the most effective way from getting from point A to point B and getting an offer. And like using LinkedIn and other platforms to make yourself highly findable has been effective.
Thank you, Ariella. So for us, and by the way, please mention how specifically did you get hired in your last role? Right, before you answer the question, like what are your favorite methods and what has worked best? Also add to that maybe start with that. How you actually got hired in your last role. So let's. What was the case for you, Ariella? How did you? What was the channel?
Recruiters. Yeah, it was recruiters that would reach out to me about given roles. Actually, no, for earlier roles, there have been some where I had reached out to them and they had posted on a social network. Others that found me through a social network, and that led to an offer.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, something that we learned from a ton of research, right? And just, a lot of you probably know this, right? So recruiters, typically they find people for opportunities, not opportunities for people. Most of them, probably like 90% of them, right? So it's trying to rely on for junior roles, especially, or like when you're just starting out. So it's, typically, so I would not spend a ton of time trying to find this good, nice recruiter that will be looking for roles for you if you're just starting out, because it's just not typically very effective. But there are exceptions, right? So as you mentioned, right, as Ariella, maybe in your case, maybe they didn't even see you as junior, right? And you reached out to them, and there was a opportunity that they were working on. So anyway, let's let others answer this. How did you actually find your last job or first job? And what are your favorite search methods and channels?
I found my last job with a recruiter. And before that, it was putting my resume or just applying to a job online and getting that. And then before that, it was a career fair. So I actually haven't gotten a job through a friend before. It's all been just seeing what works and just trying everything. So I actually really like career fairs. I've actually made some friends through career fairs, even if I haven't gotten jobs through them. They're just a great chance to just talk to people who are hiring, but also just people that are like in the field and in general. So just getting a sense of what people are looking for, but actually being able to talk to a human about it instead of trying to interpret some random online job description. So I really enjoy career fairs, even though my last role was through a recruiter.
Thanks, Andrea.
So what worked for me was, ironically, the pandemic, honestly, because so many roles have opened up that are all remote, and I could apply to ones everywhere. So I was applying to ones all across the country, and talking to people from, my job technically now is based in Minneapolis, where I am not, but it was fun because, it was a role and they needed me, and, but it worked out. That said, though, there's a very, very, very wide range of recruiters and how helpful they ultimately are, because some will, even though, to Michael's point, I completely agree that they're at a certain level, they come looking for you to find the role for you, but really they're trying to find people to fit the roles that their clients are hiring them to fill. So, but I did talk to a few, and they wound up sending some jobs my way and getting in the process of interviews and everything and whatever, and it was helpful because they talk to you a little bit, and then they send the ones that that feel right to you. One thing though that I learned pretty early on, and I just want to share the benefit of my experience, is that the fastest way to have a recruiter not call you back or just not want to talk to you at all is by telling them that you're junior. They don't really get clients, in my experience at least, who want to look for juniors. And that doesn't mean that you can't be, it just means don't call yourself that. And one of the benefits of, doing boot camps and things like that, that's pro bono work, is that you kind of get to name your own job title. So if you want to be the lead designer on a project, okay, you're the lead designer on the project. And then you just are, and you get to talk with someone because recruiters aren't going to look too closely at it. And you can kind of stretch experience a little bit. I mean, again, kind of going to the padding thing, but basically it's helping them sell the best version of you to their clients. And once you actually get some interviews and talk to the actual companies who are hiring for these jobs, then you get a much better sense of what they're looking for. You know what kind of questions they're asking. You refine how to do it, how to answer. One thing that was, again, really weird that you could do this, but it's possible now, is you can record your interviews that you're doing with these companies and then play them back later and see what you did well and what you could have improved on. I mean, I don't know any other time that I've ever been applying for jobs where it would have been cool with me, saying like, hey, let me just like hang up my phone here and record our conversation. So it's great. I mean, you actually kind of use the benefit of doing this to your advantage. But yeah, I mean, for me, recruiters, especially on LinkedIn, worked out really, really well. And they're kind of your strongest advocate too, which is another nice thing. Even though they're motivated to get you a job so they get paid, they do help you a lot because they give you some coaching too. I certainly got coached by my recruiters as I was going through the process too. And you can kind of feed them information that they can in turn give to their clients. That like when I was in a weird position where I was actually getting people competing, whatever, I had like multiple offers at the same time and trying to decide what's the best one or whatever, like motivating other people to try and see that you want to do this. Yeah, they were able to like kind of leverage that a little bit for me, and I didn't have to on my own. They sort of did it for me.
Thank you, Adam.
And it's my turn.
Yes, I think it's finally the connection is working okay. Now I'm maybe I shouldn't have said that, but because now maybe it will not be. But yeah, Zinran, please. What was
you jinxed it?
How did you find your last role? And in general, what methods and channels gave you most interviews?
Okay. My last role is basically, it's funny. In general, like the first, like New Year Day, or like the day after that, I hosted a meetup, and then ended up only 2 people showed up, and one of them contacted me like after probably like half a year or so, and she said she got an offer, and there happened to be one more opening that they are looking for, and you probably want to consider that. And so I sent my application, and very luckily that I got the offer in a very short amount of time. So that's how I got my last job. And speaking of which method gave me the most interviews, probably I'm gonna give the answer which is quite different from other people. That is, I think over 90% of my interviews that I got from application to the job board. So that's been definitely the most effective way for me. That said, I feel like the most, like not, I wouldn't say the best way, but I feel like if you do know friends that they know there's an opening in their office, it's definitely the best scenario, because 2 of my dream companies, I got interviews from those 2 companies through friends telling me that they are actively looking for a designer. And here's the link. You probably want to try. And actually I got 2 of them, and I really appreciate that opportunity, because it just gave me a lot of confidence early in the job application process. I would never imagine I could have interviewed there. And speaking of recruiters, early in my application process, I found it very effective in the sense that I got a lot of phone calls, and a lot of recruiters like email me, and I feel very excited because I feel like I nailed it, But the more I got, then I realized that they usually ask me, after the conversation, nice conversation, they ask me like, oh, do you are you a citizen or do you hold green card? Then apparently no. So that actually, majority of them just didn't go through, and I feel like it wasn't effective at all for me. So for now, I just don't talk to recruiters as much.
Got it. Yeah, that was interesting that you mentioned job boards were effective for you. So are you talking about applying on like LinkedIn or like job boards like Monster? Or what type of job boards?
I like LinkedIn the most because it's just like so simple and it feels professional. So I would say LinkedIn.
Okay, so that's good. Yeah, because based on our own research, yeah, LinkedIn is definitely huge, but in like general job boards, like older ones, for example, like Monster, etc., sometimes it can be, you can waste really lots of time, right? So if you just focus on that, like we did our own research, right? Interviewed like 50 people, and it was like 85 to 90% basically found a job in two ways, either by referral or a personal connection, right? Or by recruiter contacting them and reaching out to them, right? So another way that we identify like that can work sometimes if you really do this mass apply approach, like basically you figure out, you can use job board, what job boards are often good for, and LinkedIn is kind of like a separate beast in itself, but you can search on like Indeed to just understand what is the hiring activity like, to just get a signal whether those companies are hiring, right? And then after that, apply on their websites, right? But for that to work, you really need to make this massive. Like you need to like fill out like hundreds of applications, basically. So it's going to be really time intensive. So let's tackle the next question. So what were your guys' biggest challenges on the way to this first job? How did you overcome those?
Sort of a funny thing, but my biggest challenge, honestly, was even knowing that UX research existed, because I knew UX sort of existed, I guess, but I didn't really know what it was about. And weirdly, like I only learned this this year, but like 5 years ago, I applied to a UX research job having no idea what it was about. I was kind of looking through my old emails and saw that I had done that and thought, well, there's a good reason no one called me for that job. But just discovering that the entire field was there was the hardest part for me. And I felt like as soon as I did, then I saw that there was an actual, like field. There's a whole career there that I was interested in. And from there, I figured out how to just read different tutorial things on LinkedIn. I think there was a Lynda course. I think it's LinkedIn Learning now or something. But there are a lot of free courses just to learn about the overall how it works. And then you kind of refine, and then you just search for UX communities and talk to people who. It's just like a whole one step sort of builds on itself to the next one, the one before it, whatever. But then once and then you just kind of hammer away at it. For me, I did the same thing over and over again for a few months, and thinking I wasn't sure if it was really the right approach, but it was in the end. I mean, it just wound up clicking, and you have to give it enough time. So finding it in the first place was the hardest part. Second part was trusting that if you know what you're doing is the right thing. Giving it enough time to actually see that it works is really challenging.
For me, it was definitely letting go of perfectionism. I was very precious about my projects early on. Felt they had to be at 120% level of polish before I would let them see the light of day. And I think that really prevented me from getting a lot of would have been really helpful feedback early on, and would have saved me a ton of time. I think if I had, for example, made certain case studies public sooner, ensured that I invested enough time in that, positioning myself and marketing myself and packaging myself, I would have gotten more exposure sooner. I was just afraid, and I definitely had that like imposter syndrome and needing to build up that trust, like Adam was mentioning. And once I got those things in place, and by talking to enough people and letting go of that perfectionism and just doing enough to get feedback and building on that, testing and learning like we do anyway, I was in a much better spot.
I think kind of along those same lines is trying to find the right role for me. I'm not a visual designer, but I wanted to be a UX designer, and I didn't want my job to be UX research because I had been doing that for 5 years already. And I really wanted a UX research or a UX design role, but I didn't want visual design to be a part of that. And it was so hard because it's like every job description is like visual design. So I spent a lot of time still trying to work up those skills, even though it's not what I wanted. Or they wanted coding, so I tried to take coding classes, even though that's not what I wanted. So it's really hard to put yourself in a niche, knowing that you're going to apply to so many fewer jobs that you're qualified for. But as soon as I did that, I got a job instantly. As soon as I didn't try being something I wasn't and that I didn't want to be, it was so much easier to get a job. I was able to find a UX design role that was very focused on the enterprise level. So visual design wasn't like the first and foremost. Yeah, it's not your fancy e-commerce with your stellar visuals, but it's exactly what I wanted, where I'm solving problems and doing that every day, but I'm not doing any of the stuff I don't want to be doing. So I think that's just, don't be afraid to put yourself in a bucket. Don't try to be everything for everybody, and it's just so much easier once you do that, which feels so counterintuitive.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, I want to take a quick question from Angela from the audience. So talking about, since we have researchers here as well. So she said, I have a research-heavy background, and I'm interested in UX research roles, but it seems like many research positions I'm seeing also require design skills. What do you think are the key design tools/skills a researcher should know and incorporate in a portfolio? Adam, so that's probably mostly for you and Ariella.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting question. So I think that in any of the research roles that I've done, and I'm really fortunate in my current one because I have a monster UX department, and we have designers, we have architects, we have content strategists, and researchers. So so no one's asking me to whip something up in Figma anytime soon. But I think it's less about necessarily having those technical skills to be able to create mocks and do wireframes and do low fidelity wire. You don't have to. No one's going to ask you as a researcher to do those things, and if they do, then honestly, it's not a good organization. I have to say it, if they're going to asking you to do the research but also do the design of it, then they're probably a pretty immature group, and it's going to be a lot of struggle. And I know personally, I wouldn't be qualified to do it, and I wouldn't want to even try because it would be a nightmare. So I know that sounds like a really weird thing to say, but once you see it, you're like, oh yeah, that's actually true. I think though what helps me though is being able to talk to designers and know what they like what they're working with, and what their needs and constraints are, and being sort of conversant in their language enough that you don't have to ask them to translate to human speak, but to say like this part and like this element of this and like here's the interstitial and here's like immigrant menu and whatever kinds of like terms that they're using to make their lives a little bit easier it's like learning a language. It's like learning another language that you're able to talk to them in, and it helps you have that commonality where you're not translating from one thing to another and hoping that like you get it right. You you're on the same page a lot, and then with the test and know what kind of design recommendations that you're giving, and it helps build trust, and then you're able to do it a lot more effectively.
I think on top of that, so I like I said, I was a researcher for a long time. Knowing how to prototype, even if you don't know how to do visual design, it's so helpful if a researcher knows how to get into InVision and change things around as needed, or add screens as necessary to switch from one task to the next, or kind of get involved in the prototyping process, and being able to do that, or being able to put together a test where all you need is to say, I need this visual, I need this visual, or I need this visual. Something where you're so close to the design that maybe you're not doing the actual design work, but you're filling in all the gaps that make it easier for the designer to just get you what you need as a researcher to just get a study up and running without them also essentially creating the test for you. So it's really that kind of prototyping stage where the more you can get into the field of prototyping, the better researcher you're going to be, because that's like the key integration point between a researcher and a designer. So I felt like I was doing
that too.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The audio is still, I think I'm like 30 seconds behind, so I apologize. Please finish your statement.
The more prototyping skills I learned, the better testing got, because I wasn't constantly going back to my designer and saying, oh, I need it to be this way, I need it to be this way. I could just do that myself, and it was so much easier. And then as a designer, having a researcher that can kind of work in that, so you're not fixing the small things. It's really, really helpful.
Just in time, when we were wanting to hear from the Ariela's answer. Okay, so we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, let's take a quick question from the audience again. Okay, so let's pick something with more votes. What are some successful speaking/interview tips for those who are transitioning with a different background to UX, UI? I would say just maybe you could summarize your key interview tips in general. So this is a question from Lily. Jan?
I can go first. I think the key is to never, ever, ever hurt yourself in the interview. So don't call yourself junior. Don't call yourself transitioning. You are a UX designer who is currently practicing UX design, and here's how your history makes you even better at that. So really speak confidently about yourself and let them place you in buckets they want to place you in. If they think based on how you've talked about yourself, you're junior or whatever, that's on them, but you're not putting yourself in that bucket for them. You are the expert. You are the one in that room speaking about yourself, saying, here's what I know, here's what I'm good at, here's what I'm learning, here's everything on the table about what makes me awesome. It's up to you to decide if you think that as well. I transitioned straight into a senior designer. I did not go through junior roles or mid-level. I went straight into senior roles because I told it like it was. I was like, here's what I'm good at, here's what I know, but I am not going to sell myself as a junior. You have to place me there if that's where you think I'm supposed to be, you know? So don't sell yourself short. Know your stuff and just go in as if you know it, and you'll come across as a lot more experienced, because you have so much more experience than just your 2 seconds of UX experience. So bring that in.
Thank you, Andrea. Do you guys also want to add? I have a very closely related question, right? So kind of continuing on that topic, but your biggest mistakes and lessons again, but specifically for during the interviewing process.
So, sorry, just for clarification, do you mean during the actual, while you're talking to the hiring people interviews, or like the broader interview process?
Just in general, like anything from talking to a recruiter who reached out to you, potentially, like anything from first round to final round. And Adam, if you could maybe lean in a little bit more, I think it's.
Yeah. I think so. Is this better?
I think so. Yeah, it's a little louder.
Okay. I think what helped me, and I mean, I think this is speaking from my capacity as a researcher, but I think this is probably a little bit applicable towards any UX position, maybe any position. So at the levels that you guys are going to be applying to, you are you're going to be individual contributors, so ICs, kind of shorthand for it. But at the same time, you'll probably be on teams. And something that I found people really responded well to was talking about how well you work on teams and how well you are integrated into the whole process. Because UX, while we think it's everything, is a part of a larger whole of the whole product building operation, and being able, I think, to see it being part of that whole and kind of know that you're supporting one element of it that is all in terms of delivering a larger product, and then within your own team too, gives people the confidence that they can rely on you to do what you need to do, but also work well with them and know that you're going to be able to source things the way that you need to, if you need to, but not necessarily at every chance that you can take. But it's a balance, unfortunately. But I think what my approach was that as a researcher was to say how much I wanted to involve people at research in every stage, just so there was a lot of awareness and there was a lot of just buy-in from all the stakeholders, and no one was going to be surprised by anything in the whole methodology and just the overall process, and it builds a lot of confidence and trust. So I think for that, in my interview approaches, it was showing how collaborative I was, still taking initiative, but making sure that I involve people because they are involved, and they don't want to have to worry about if this is going the right way or not. If they have to keep bugging you to say, hey, just checking in, how are things going? It let people feel that I wanted to be on their teams, and I would be a valuable addition to them too.
Thank you, Adam. So for other folks, just to recap the question quickly, right? What were your biggest mistakes and lessons during the interviewing process specifically, and what are your top recommendations to others based on that?
I think to add to what Adam was mentioning, the ability to speak with people on a team, I think also talking about different projects I had managed, being able to lead cross-functional teams, even if not necessarily in UX capacity, was something that seemed to make a lot of the conversations it flow much more naturally. People liked hearing that I had delivered projects before, kept things on time, was able to negotiate and make trade-offs with stakeholders, because that's something that you're going to be doing day in, day out. As a UX designer, you're not always going to be able to build the perfect product. There's always, you go from what the mock-up is to what it ends up being based on the constraints that you're working within, and being able to show that you already know how to work within those types of constraints and can deliver things and lead those types of projects can be really helpful. I think for me also, I realized that my background in analytics was really valuable to a lot of companies because it's not just, building something. You want to measure how successful it is after the fact, and be able to use analytics as a signal to introduce new design changes and have a quantitative element to your research as well as qualitative. So from a UX design perspective and UX research perspective, that's something I was able to fall back on quite a bit when it was either explaining the value that I had added in prior roles in my case studies, being able to frame it as a business value and be able to quantify it, as well as show how I would use those types of signals and ensure that the work that I was doing aligned with the business goal in the future. That way you don't get put into the bucket of the creative that builds things just for themselves. And you can show the business value UX design has in the process.
Thanks, Ariel. Okay, feel free to chime in, guys, on your most challenging things that you did during the interviewing process, your biggest mistakes and lessons and recommendations to others, interviewing process specifically.
May I? There.
Of course.
Okay. So make sure I'm not interrupting anyone.
Thank you, Ziram.
Yeah, I couldn't hear Andrea, but I don't know why. What's the reason? So challenges and learnings, there's a lot of them. If I only have to come up with one thing, is that I feel like it's a shift of mindset. Essentially, what I had before is how I can present a story or my project in a creative way. But after a period of time, then I realized that I need to be very aware of what they want to hear. So it may be different. Like for instance, oftentimes I tend to speak to my strength or the things I'm good at. Like I told them that I won some awards of illustrations, that kind of stuff. However, at one point I realized that that is not necessarily the things that they are looking for. Plus, it may not be the things you would like to do in your next role. So you don't have to really talk about those things if you don't want to do those kind of things in your next role. So that's sort of like a mindset shift. And also on top of that, there's a lot of storytelling and the presentation things that can be prepared. I did prepare in the past, but I feel like lots of work can be prepared even extensively. Like have to know the work inside out. No matter what question that they throw at you, you know how to respond. And also knowing that what they are expecting you to say and what you can say that also ties back to your own experience.
Thank you, Ziram. Yeah, that's very good.
So one thing that that I made a mistake in doing, probably more than once, and it sounds, to me this sounds weird, but I think it's true, is realizing that early on it was a bad fit. and still trying to, well, like, kind of impress them. And I know, you know, in an interview setting, you know, when you're looking for a job, you want to impress them as much as possible. And I knew that we just were like, there was just sort of like a weird, like, kind of personality clash, and I didn't know how I could bridge it between, you know, what I could do well and what they needed. And I felt like every answer I was giving wasn't really quite right. And I, you know, kept on kind of like trying to adjust to them. And to Jinron's point, I mean, yes, I mean, know what they're looking for and everything, but also know, I think when you're interviewing somewhere where you just feel like, oh, I don't think I would want to, you know, I don't think I'd get along well here. It just doesn't feel like the right kind of environment, even in an interview setting where everybody's, you know, supposed to be like, you know, really super positive and happy and everything. So, so I think it's trying to force it, basically, I think was my mistake. And I think had I kind of loosened up, then I probably would have done even better, like, you know, with them, instead of trying to impress them. So I think that's it. If you're on an interview and it's a little early in and you feel like you're just not on the right footing exactly, I don't want to say call it a wash, but assume it probably is going to be, and then you'll relax. You may find that you're going to give answers that are a lot more honest and maybe even impressive, like, in the end. So it's ultimately, I think interviewers respond best when you're comfortable. And if you kind of project like an air of being comfortable, which mostly comes from being comfortable, it's kind of hard to fake, then your chances improve of getting along well with them and getting an offer. So I guess that's it, is that, you know, my biggest mistake was not being comfortable when I had the choice to try and be, at least.
Thanks, Adam. So who hasn't answered this yet? Andrea, did you?
I mean, I've answered it already with just saying, you know, don't talk down about yourself. I do this all the time. I tend to be overly honest and to a hindrance, and, you know, that's essentially been my downfall whenever I've been job searching, and so that's why that would be my advice, to not do that. So
Thanks, Andrea. So we only have a couple of minutes to wrap up the actual panel, and then we'll spend a few minutes to do some more Q&A. So here's what I also wanted to ask you guys. What was actually getting harder for you? Was it getting interviews or getting offers, basically? The search or the interviewing?
I think for me, I looked at it, it's like a funnel. So, you know, at the top, there's going to be much more volume. And then each step in the process, it's going to, at least for me, reduce the number of shots at goal. So there was going to, you know, be, you know, if you have like 100 interviews, like our initial screens, you might have, you know, 75 to 50, you know, next rounds. And then out of that, you might have, you know, 30 to 20, you know, third rounds. And then you might have of, you know, final rounds or portfolio reviews that could lead to potentially, you know, 1 to 2 offers. I think once I got into the process and was able to figure out what my gaps were at those earlier stages and figure out where I was getting stuck, I was able to get through the process and have a better shot at goal, increase my, the interview to offer ratio. But it's still, I think, a lot of the time a numbers game, and it's about figuring out where in the funnel, from the very beginning, getting a resume reviewed through the initial call, the portfolio review to offer, where you should focus your attention, figure out where you're dropping out the most. And that's what I found to be most helpful in terms of getting an offer eventually.
Are we frozen? No, we're live. Okay. Sorry, everyone in the video just seemed like they were doing a still life for a second. So we were all just captivated by your answer, Ariella.
That's all I want.
So for me, God, it's a weird mix. I mean, in so many ways, interviewing is just applying and getting the interviews is a numbers game, because if you find roles on LinkedIn or wherever, I know they put the little number saying how many people also did, but that's just on their service, and you don't know how many other people have done it in other ways too. So you could be applying for jobs where 100, 200, whatever people also have done it, and you have no way to know that. I think for me, getting interviews then was harder. My interview to application process was pretty grim, but the interviews themselves, I guess I kind of did okay. I mean, I feel like I did I could have done much better, but I think I did fine enough. And the hard part is that is sitting in a few of them, is just getting enough practice, because the more you do them, the better you're going to get. And so I know that's a really hard thing to recommend, is just, get more interviews. All right, well, it's not like they're as easy to get as it sounds, but take the ones you can get, and then as you do them, the interviews themselves will come more frequently. I mean, definitely towards the end of my job search, I was getting more interviews. So clearly I was starting to do things right, even if I couldn't really recognize what those were. But the interviews themselves, I feel like were easier for me to do than getting them.
Thanks, Adam. Okay, awesome. So let's take some more questions from the audience, because we have still quite a few questions. Guys, please feel free to write more, and especially, what's even more important, upvote the ones that you really like, so we can help the most people here, okay? So Helen is asking, I have a research background from undergrad, and along with psychology courses, where and how could I learn more about UX research given very beginner knowledge and zero UX research experience?
I would recommend the User Research Collective. There's a Slack group and a website as well, just as an initial piece. I found that group to be particularly helpful, and I've also sourced, when I've hired researchers, I've sourced candidates from that channel. And it's also just a nice way to hear what other people are talking about, what their concerns are, what their challenges are. So I think Slack groups like that, there's some Facebook groups as well, where you can post questions, see what other people are asking about or talking about, so you can develop a fluency and start to understand what to look for. There's, of course, all the books and the blogs. Interviewing Users is a really great foundational book that I would recommend for anyone. And I will often refer back to it from time to time. So I think those are some recommendations, and I'm sure the rest of the panel here is a lot more, so I'll let you guys add to that.
So I can totally add on to that too. I think for me, the way that I started really learning about it was in books. I mean, I'm a nerd, so I kind of go back to books all the time anyway. But there are some people like Tomer Sharon is a pretty big figure in the community. He's written a few books about UX research. There's Steve Krug has written a few. Also, Don't Make Me Think was his biggest one, I think. Forget the names of the other ones. But reading a few of those, they do overlap a little bit, but that's okay. I mean, because then you see what they have in common with each other, and then you see what are really kind of the foundational parts of UX research. And completely agree with Ariella that there are groups that do it too. I also found that listening to podcasts was an interesting way to hear what people were doing with UX research. So some of my favorites were Mixed Methods, did a bunch. They don't do it very often these days, but they still have some really good long form UX research interviews. I also my favorite UX podcast is one called Design Details, where they've recently started doing some more UX research things, and I think that they're just interesting guys who I like their perspective on it. There's What's Wrong with UX is another podcast. These two wonderful women who are really, really funny, and they really just gripe about UX things, but they're coming from a very good place. But it's good to hear, because you hear people who are both professionals in the field, and they also care enough about it that they want to share what they have in sort of a public way, and they're good at doing it. So I felt like, for me, listening to those podcasts, reading the books too, but the podcasts especially actually tended to make me feel like I was part of a conversation, and I was getting a little bit of the benefit of their experiences just by listening to them.
Thanks, Adam. So let's do another question. So Michelle, and we'll have to wrap up pretty soon, so we'll take maybe a couple more questions or so. Michelle is asking, speaking of whiteboard challenges, what should a UX professional expect and prepare for? So I know it's a huge topic, right? That we can do a whole event, or maybe a whole 10-week event about design challenges potentially. But in a nutshell, who wants to just quickly summarize what whiteboarding challenges are about and what to expect?
I can speak to that. It really depends, because I've been to different types of whiteboard challenges. And I think the typical one is they give you sort of like a question and design something. It can be physical, it can be digital, but most of the time that I encountered were digital. So basically an app, a website, or some sort of like a web app. And usually it's about 30 minutes or 40 minutes to came up with something. And most of the time that you have to ask the interviewer what do you expect. Usually it's gonna be some sort of ideation, understanding the problem, asking questions to gain some of the expectation, and then started with, the user groups, and it's sort of like a very define who are the users, what are scenarios, when, why they use this product, and then normally came up with a typical flow, and then wireframes. That's pretty much it, and then end up with a conclusion or like a recap. It's always good to have a recap, but most of the time you may not even get to that step. And speaking of how much you should spend on each section, it really depends. So what I did is usually I asked them like how much you expect me to provide. And if they don't give you a very clear answer, then usually the rule of thumb is to spend some time to define the problem before you get into the design solutions. And it's always good to get to the wireframes. Doesn't have to be extensive, but even some wireframes that help illustrate your idea in a cohesive way, it's a good practice. And there are definitely some other odd situations that I encountered, which was a product critique, sort of, and then came up with a flow to justify your thoughts. So it lasted 1 hour, which was not typical.
Thank you, Zinran. Anyone else wants to add anything quickly to that?
I think the biggest things with whiteboarding challenges is focusing on the intent of the whiteboard challenge instead of you feeling like you're being tested on your solution. So it's very much, how do you involve the other people in the room? How do you answer questions? How do you ask questions? How do you take a problem that's been given to you and frame it into a way that you understand it? What is your process like? How do you think through certain things? How do you ideate? Rather than coming up with the perfect solution and really just focusing on how do I solve this problem? It's more, what is my process for making sure everyone in the room is a part of what is going on in my head? How do I talk through things? How do I say things out loud and things like that? So really focusing on owning the room rather than owning the problem you were given. I mean, do that too, but a lot of it is testing you on your collaboration skills more than anything.
Thanks, Andrea.
Yeah, to add to that, I think even just practicing working with a whiteboard and talking out loud, like it seems very easy to do, but in the moment, you might find yourself freezing up if that's not something you've done before. Or if you're like me, have terrible handwriting. It's important to be able to ensure that you're making everything legible and clear, practicing different frameworks, like creating different graphs or axes, just so you have things to fall back on if you're the type of person that maybe gets a little bit nervous in interview situations. That's definitely something that's helped me ensure that I was ready to get in front of people, particularly if it's remote, practicing using Mural or Miro, whatever whiteboarding tool that might be available. The last thing you want to do is go into your remote whiteboarding session and have to spend the first 5 minutes getting acquainted with the tool set and where things live and how things work.
Thank you, Ariella. This is great. So in spite of all the quirks from Big Marker or Wi-Fi, whatever that was, we actually made it through. And so I hope you guys enjoyed the event. Let me also briefly tell you about the program that we're running, since it may be a great opportunity for some of the folks in the audience. So basically what BeginX is, right? It's a part-time UX career accelerator program with real social impact clients, designed to help people transition into UX without quitting their jobs. So far, we've run 9 cohorts, helped over 90 people or so transition into UX. Alumni of the program have been hired by companies like SiriusXM, Coach, Google, ABC News, Facebook, JP Morgan, and many more. And basically all the folks you guys have seen today are our alumni as well. So recently, we have also been featured and ranked by SwitchUp as also one of the best design programs overall. The advisors and mentors are also coming from UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, Frog, The Economist, and many others. So who the program is best for, right? The program is the best fit for people who know UX basics or come from a design, research, creative, tech, or related background and look to transition into UX in one of the most efficient and affordable ways and without quitting their current jobs. We're pretty selective and look for motivated and committed team players. The overall outcome, like what you gain is after completing the program, is you basically build not just the hard skills, but the critical softer skills listed on almost any job description, along with real experience. You expand your professional network and get ready to land a UX job. So in fact, because our grads have done so well, now we offer a money-back guarantee. Basically, you land a UX job or you get your tuition back, plus an extra $200. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, you can learn more at onbeginnings.com. The next start date is actually November 10th, so it's very soon. This cohort is pretty much full, but because the cohorts are quite small, they fill up pretty quickly. So if you're interested, please act soon, right? It's so also for anyone who attended this event and basically will be able to get a $200 tuition credit if accepted into the program, right? So what you need to do to claim that credit is by this Wednesday, so by tomorrow, just go to the website and schedule a free, no commitment career transition consultation where we can help you map out your career and see if it's a fit or not, or request program info or just apply on the website, right? So with that said, we run many different types of events. So we'll keep you guys updated about upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter that is usually sent every couple of weeks or so. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight, and thank you our wonderful speakers for all the awesome insights that you shared in spite of the platform issues that we experienced. It was a huge pleasure to have you guys here. And if anyone has any other questions, we'll probably hang around maybe for like a couple more minutes to just answer those. So virtual applause to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I can probably just hang for like a couple of minutes. I just want to see if there are any other upvotes, any other urgent questions. So please just, if you have an urgent question, go ahead and type it or upvote it, and we'll maybe tackle a couple more very quickly. So Sruthi is asking, how long is a typical job hunt for your first UX position?
Typical what?
A typical job hunt. Like how long did it take you to get your first UX position from starting your search?
Let's see. It took me, I guess, 2.5 months, something like that, 2.5 to 3 months. But it was so weird. I mean, doing it during COVID, and yeah, I mean, also it was, I was unemployed, so I had a lot of time, and I was able to, really make that my job. So it depends on how much time you can really put into it, because I'm pretty sure that if I had been trying to look for work while I was working full time, it could have taken me, a lot longer potentially.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, I do a lot of mentoring students, and I would say it takes them mostly anywhere between 3 to 6 months, depending on how motivated and quick they are to get a job after a boot camp. Obviously, that I'm not counting the time period it takes to learn the role and the job stuff itself. But once you're in kind of the and building my assets, and I'm starting to actually apply to jobs. I'd say anyone who's motivated and who takes the advice you've learned here and the advice you learn as you go, I would say 3 to 6 months is pretty standard.
Thanks, Andrea. Okay, so maybe last one. Okay, so Kristen is asking, I've really struggled this past year with UX. I was hired for a job in the airline industry and quickly got let go due to COVID. I've been very discouraged with the hiring process. I'm thinking about Nielsen Norman Group UX certification, but it's very pricey. What do you recommend considering? I haven't done a ton of UX related things since March. I did recently complete a coding class and I've done other events like this. Okay, this is good. This is like a case study that we could potentially maybe brainstorm quickly and just help out, like what Kristen could potentially do.
Can Chris say what he was? I'm sorry to hear that, with the airline thing, but what the job that he got from the airline was? Was that a UX? That was a UX job?
So she said she got a UX role, within airline industry.
Oh, okay. Gosh, I feel like if you can get one job in the UX industry, I think it shows that you probably have a really good sense of what.
Adam, sorry, she should just clarify. Junior UX researcher.
Oh, okay. I think probably just again from my experience. Apply to things that aren't junior. Really apply to things that are like just sort of like mid-level. I was even applying to senior things and getting kind of interviews from it just because I applied to them. It's a really brutal reality that there should be more junior researchers and designers than any other amount of any other kind, you would think, because of just the way things work and time and whatever. But in my experience, there was probably one junior role for every 10 senior roles. And I think positioning yourself as somebody who who was applying for more senior roles may, be get better results.
I think to add to that too, while again, it is a pandemic, and I certainly don't want to, I think we talked about this before, don't want to encourage people to take on free work if that's not something that's in your capacity for right now. But I would say to the extent that you're able to potentially work out a work trade situation, I've even done to get more things in the pipeline, and also just to have like existing clients. I've done things they just they fed me, and that helped me remove some of my expenses, and I was able to get the experience and able to say yes, I do have an existing client, and that made the conversations that was happening that I had move a lot more. I can't say words tonight. Wow, so apologies. It's like 9 p.m. My brain's off. It made things a lot easier because I had existing clients. It made it easier for me to position myself on the market, get more hits on my resume, get more interviews. So to the extent that you can either do pro bono or do a work trade, get paid a small amount stipend, or get some food covered for you with either a mutual aid group or any type of nonprofit or a small startup, just to get it in. Since you're saying you haven't done any UX stuff since March, that can at least just help you show that you have an active project, and it might help get you more hits. Certifications can certainly be good, but I think the best thing is having a project.
Yeah, I like to say if you're not working, you should be learning. So constantly be doing something that says, here's what I'm currently doing. Don't ever be saying that you're not doing either of those things. So if you don't have a current job, you better have something you're currently working on learning. And if you have a current job, then you, even if it's free, you have something to say, here's what I'm currently doing. Somebody actually values my work enough to be doing something with me right now. So always be doing something. I've done the Nielsen Norman certification. It's not worth the money unless your employer pays for it, in my personal opinion. It's nice, but it's very overpriced. It's very much meant for people whose employers are paying for it. So I wouldn't pay for it out of pocket yourself. It doesn't. I've never hired somebody specifically because they had Nielsen Norman certification. It's much more of a networking event than anything. So I would definitely steer clear of it, and unless an employer encouraged you to go.
In general, by the way, I would just encourage you to, you mentioned you haven't really been building yourself up much after March, right? Which is completely understandable, right? Given the whole crazy situation. But, you know, you have some time to adjust, right? So what I would definitely recommend is also start building yourself up more, right? Because now you need to be a little bit more competitive in the market, right? So just, again, volunteer, do projects so that you essentially the product that we talked about, right? So your skills and experience stand out more. It can just be pro bono, right? It doesn't have to be, I assume, right? You can, I'm not saying like do that full time, right? Because you obviously need to support yourself, I assume, right? But you can do it on a part-time basis, right? Even if you don't have a UX role at the moment, right? Basically just working on building yourself up. Like use this time to just keep building. All right, and that way you'll be getting better and better and better, and you'll have something in your resume that can stand out. Okay. So with that said, guys, I think we can probably wrap up. I know it's already 9:30 almost in New York. So once again, thank you guys for joining, and thank you for getting through all the connection challenges and being so persevering and making it. We have really great feedback in the chat. Lots of people say thank you. This was awesome. So thank you guys for your insights, and thanks to the audience. Thanks to you guys for all these wonderful comments. All right. Cheers, everyone.